Welcome into this Big Ten today on a Tuesday. We're presented by Gatorade. It is great to have you with us, Dave Revson, Anthony Herron. We head into a huge weekend for a number of Big Ten players.
There have been some championships that have been handed out for the conference with their individual athletes, but when you're talking individual accolades, having the NFL draft upon us doesn't get much better than that. And this is a pretty formidable show we have, Dave. We're packing a lot into this. I haven't gotten to talk to you for a little while. Looking forward to it.
I like the use of formidable for this show. I think it
Did
creates...
I put the emphasis on the proper syllable?
That's never an issue with the English major. The emphasis is always on the correct syllable. But I like the adjective. I like the description.
Right.
We aim to be formidable, and we'll start with the NFL draft, which is our big story. The draft coming to Big Ten country this year. It is in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and the conference figures to be all over it. Most mock drafts somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 to 10 Big Ten players going in the first round. You see some of the stars: Abdul, Tyler Warren, Mason Graham, Emeka, Egbuka, among the headliners from a Big Ten that was chock full of star power this season. So let's get into some of the players. I'm always interested in your evaluations. I want to start with the guy who it feels like the consensus is he's going to be the first Big Ten player off the board, Abdul Carter of Penn State. I've seen him a lot at number 3, kind of the highest I've seen him going potentially. What do you make of Carter as an NFL prospect, and what stands out here?
What fascinates me as much as anything about Abdul Carter is that he was so remarkably productive as a player for Penn State really throughout his entire career. But then, as we talked about so much on this show and others on the network, he was moving to a new position last season and was exceptionally productive at that new position. But then, frankly, there's still a lot of meat on the bone for how he can continue to refine his game as a defensive end, edge defender, to be able to set a physical edge against the run, to be as consistent as he needs to be with his fits and his angles as a pass rusher. There's a lot of things that his just raw athleticism and tenacity could kind of cover up for at times when he wasn't completely sure where the ball carrier was, where the quarterback would end up, what the true blocking surface was that presented itself to him. But he was still able to get to the ball, to make plays, to rush the quarterback, to penetrate into the backfield without even having a fully varnished set of skills, a toolbox that could really be expounded upon. So that's what's as exciting about Abdul Carter as anything else. He's compared pretty favorably with another Penn State great in Micah Parsons, and they almost come at it from opposite ends because Micah Parsons did play true defensive end earlier in his development in high school and then learned to play off-ball linebacker. Then it sort of developed into, when you're looking at where Abdul Carter's at and things, he played mostly off-ball linebacker and now is learning to put his hand in the dirt. But both guys, just rare talents, rare specimens for their position.
It's pretty amazing to make a position switch one year and then to be thought of as highly as he is. Obviously was incredibly highly touted and was a productive player before moving from linebacker to that edge spot. But again, edge rushers are at such a premium in the NFL. And let's keep it with defensive lineman Mason Graham. Thought maybe he might be the next player in the Big Ten off the board, but really talented defensive tackle. Give people a sense for the scouting report on him.
Now, there's a number of players in this draft cycle who you wonder what is their true ceiling and where could they go, which team could end up prioritizing them because you're trying to combine. What is their ceiling? What do you project them to become as professionals? But then also, what did the film actually show in college? And there's not a project, there's not a product, there's no player in this draft whose film is more clean than Mason Graham. Just grading him, game in, game out, snap in, snap out, the production that was there, not only in just sacking the quarterback or making tackles for loss, but just in block destruction, block disruption. Mason Graham, every time he got onto the football field, you line up 1, 2, sometimes 3 offensive linemen across from him, other tight ends coming in motion, running backs trying to chip him, and he just knew where the ball was, plays with exceptional leverage, the hand placement you hope for on a defensive lineman to be able to stack, to be able to shed blockers, to make sure that they are pressed away from his body with violence, getting off of them and getting into the backfield. There's no one who most consistently executed their task at their position like Mason Graham did with the type of dominance we saw him do it with. And yes, the measurables are above average, but maybe not amongst the 1%ers for interior defensive linemen in height, in weight, in overall straight line speed. But all are above average. And then you actually turn on the film and just say, this is an exceptional football player. So if he's viewed as someone who doesn't get drafted as highly as some may have anticipated coming in, there was talk of somewhere in the top 2 to 3 range for him. The reason would be the measurables, but someone in the top 10 is going to get maybe the best player in this draft.
Yeah, almost every draft you look at has him in the top 10. There are a couple mocks I've seen where he falls out of it, but it feels like that's where he fits. How about his teammate, Kenneth Grant? It feels like there's a little bit more division on him. I think some see more upside than others. Another defensive lineman. Give us a sense of his skill set and where you see him fitting in.
He's a remarkable athlete. He's bigger than Mason Graham and, frankly, faster, more sudden at times in his movement than Mason Graham. Now, by comparison, his teammate Mason Graham, more technically sound. Kenneth Grant, a bit more of a moldable lump of clay, not as consistent with his fundamentals of defensive line play, but he makes up for it because he plays the game with a fury. You love the fact that he's willing to at his size, well over 330 pounds, but he'll chase the ball down. We remember some of those highlights throughout his career for this mammoth individual running backs and receivers down in the open field. You don't see this type of athleticism at that size very often in the sport of football. And there was also production that was associated with it as well. He's just on one of the top defenses in college football. So you got Graham next to him, Stewart on one edge, linebackers and DBs all over the place making plays. So I do think that negated the actual numerical production that could have even been there for Kenneth Grant more so. But you look at the film, and yes, this is a guy more than worthy of a first-round pick. It ends up being which team falls in love with him most for how high he'll go.
It's interesting. You talk about just kind of the sheer athleticism, and I think back to seeing him in camp for the first time. And, for me, obviously, I don't look at it in quite, I don't have the education in football that you do, right? So for me, it's more about just kind of like, does a guy look the part? Does he just stand out? And he was one of those guys, you just look at him, run through drills and just say, whoa. He's just an incredible athlete, and the way that he moves for that size, to your point, is really remarkable. What about another interior lineman, Derrick Harmon, who started at Michigan State, transferred out to Oregon, incredibly productive player. And I know what intrigues NFL players, NFL teams, I should say, about him as a player is his ability to rush the passer from the interior as well as stop the run, but just an incredibly talented player.
And a guy who played the full scope of his career. And so you see someone who's more well-rounded in his all-around game. We saw a lot of this on display during his time in East Lansing, kind of the havoc-based kind of defense that he played with the Spartans. And he was able to bring that out to Eugene with the Oregon Ducks. And on a team that was just better overall, then we saw the full skill set of Derrick Harmon on display. And it led to victories. And sometimes that's a part of the draft profile of a player as well. Were you a part of winning? Were you part of a championship puzzle? And adding Derrick Harmon into what was already a deep defensive front, you look at it, and there wasn't, on a really deep D-line, there was not a player more productive, more consistently than Derrick Harmon. And he could play the run, penetrating into the backfield, and like you mentioned, certainly got after the quarterback at an extremely high level as well. And in a league, in the National Football League, that's just, we're starting to see the running back position, the run game, and that being valued again at a higher level, but you have got to pressure the quarterback in the NFL. And when you're a player who showcases the skills to do that to the extent that Derrick Harmon has, there are going to be teams, there are already teams I've spoken to who have fallen in love with the skill set he brings to the table because he is one of those guys that schematically can play on the move, can defeat blocks in quick fashion and get on the opposing side of the line of scrimmage.
To your point, the most pressures of any interior defensive lineman in the country last year with 34. So it speaks to his ability to get to the passer from that defensive tackle spot. Let's go to the other side of the line of scrimmage. Tyler Warren, I'm happy for him. I'm sad for us that we won't be able to watch him anymore because the versatility that he showed off, and Andy Kolonicki obviously did such a great job of moving him around as a chess piece this year, but he is seen likely as the top tight end off the board. Give us a sense for Tyler Warren. We know how good he was at this level. What about at the next level? Well,
at the next level, what we saw develop a lot throughout his college career is he became more and more of a guy who could be a physical point of attack blocker. And, playing a high school quarterback, skill position guy, got moved around at that level, then got to Penn State and playing tight end full-time. Penn State, the way they valued running the football, his big physical frame continued to grow. He expanded in how formidable he was in being an inline blocker. But like you mentioned, especially this past season, when Andy Kotelnicki came in and took over Penn State's offense, you saw the volume that Tyler Warren was utilized with. And there's frankly some folks who are viewing that as a bit of a negative and saying that his numbers were a bit inflated by comparison to other tight ends in that regard. I think statistically that's true. But the positive in that is that you got to see what a playmaker Tyler Warren is. And by comparison to some of the guys who are already in the National Football League who still maybe struggle with making contested catches, or when they're not separated from defenders, extending their hands away from their body to make grabs, and out in the open field, if maybe they're not as natural after the catch, running, eluding defenders, stiff-arming tacklers while they're having the football in the offhand. We've seen Tyler Warren do all that stuff in State College and do it at a really high level. So he's tight end one off the board, and to me, there shouldn't be a lot of question about it.
And there's some talk maybe that Colston Loveland would be tight end two. Give us your breakdown of the Michigan tight end.
Well, we know, again, how Michigan values running the football. So Colston Loveland, even though he's a little more slender and angular in his build, he's shown the ability to do that at a high level. Now, by comparison to Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland is a guy who's probably more fluid in his route running ability, a bit more sleek in the way he gets in and out of his cuts, and has shown the ability to separate from defenders perhaps at a higher level than Tyler Warren did. There wasn't the volume to his playmaking throughout his college career in Ann Arbor. It's a passing attack that struggled, of course, especially this past season for the Wolverines, and we ended up finding out that Colston Loveland was playing through an injury as well. But that speaks to his toughness and his commitment to his football team, that he was willing to sort of gut that out and battle through it. But everyone you talk to loves the film, and even though he was in a passing offense that just wasn't in a position to feature any pass catchers, let alone the tight end position, but when the opportunity was there, even though the volume of opportunity was fairly low, but when the ball was thrown anywhere near Colston Loveland, you saw him go out and snatch the football and do it with confidence and be able to continue running after the catch. And so if you're looking for a tight end who showcases that he can block, that he can catch the football, and that he can also be a playmaker afterwards, there wasn't the same volume with Tyler Warren, but you do see stylistically a different guy who can be a big-time playmaker.
Yeah, I'm with you. Incredible athlete. A lot of talk of him 14 to the Colts. That seems to be the one that everyone has pegged for him. I want to talk about one of his teammates, Will Johnson, because I don't want to say he's a divisive player in this draft. I would just say that where he is being evaluated or projected right now does not equate to where he was being projected at the beginning of the season. We've seen him fall. Injuries were a part of that. He ended up not running on the pro day, so there's some question about that. That all being said, Will Johnson was seen as a clear-cut top 5 pick going into last season. So where do you see him now, and might there be some value were he to fall down a little bit on the board?
Well, the thing you notice is that Will Johnson not being projected as highly in the draft this season, it hasn't been because there's a bunch of other corners who've surpassed him in the evaluation. He's still seen as likely the top corner. Now, Travis Hunter, is he a wide receiver, is he a corner?
Right.
But the top pure corner to come off the board will still very likely, and by most accounts, be Will Johnson. But it may be later in the first round than we anticipated, as we discussed this a few months ago. But a very long frame and great anticipatory skills on the route. When the ball is in flight, Will Johnson treats it like it's his football. He plays it like a wide receiver. You didn't get to get him on the clock to test that straight line speed. That's one of the questions that's there about Will Johnson in coverage, that recovery speed that you hope for from a top flight corner. But when you factor that in, you still see someone who faced some of the top receivers in the country over the last couple of seasons. And while just shutting down anyone just in pure man coverage, as he got the opportunity to do at times in Michigan, can be a difficult task. But when you're looking for someone to make plays on the football, he utilizes long arms, a long frame, and being a student of the game to be able to anticipate those routes.
Perfect size for an NFL corner. I mean, just prototypical size. I want to ask you about one last guy, Emeka Egbuka, incredibly productive, as we know, as a college player. He seems to project bottom of the first or top of the second round, seen as a really safe pick, great route runner. What do you see? Is he worth a first-round shot, you think?
He is. And for a lot of slot receivers, a lot of them are more diminutive in their stature than Emeka Egbuka. He's a guy who can bring physicality to the interior of the route tree. And at times when you have a linebacker, a safety colliding with you as you're trying to make contested grabs, we've seen Emeka Egbuka showcase a willingness to do that, the courage that it takes at times to do that at a high level. He's been able to show that. And, he was never necessarily the guy who was at the top of the scouting report for pass catchers in Columbus because so many amazing pass catchers were there throughout his career. But the dependability that Egbuka showed, and it leads to why he put up historic numbers in his time in Columbus, even though he wasn't always the main pass catcher.
He would be their 5th first-round wide receiver in the last 4 years.
Astounding.
Pretty amazing. Yeah, they've got a pretty good pipeline there. Lots more from Ant coming up. We're going to check in with Michigan Gymnastics next. What a weekend, a team national title, an individual national title. Fred Richard will join us to discuss both. And then Anthony rejoins me as well. Spring storylines throughout the Big Ten. He'll tell us what has caught his eye. This is Big Ten Today. Our Gatorade game leaders, 9 national titles and counting for the Big Ten this academic year. Michigan joining the party this weekend by capturing the men's gymnastics national championship for the 7th time ever. They won it in Ann Arbor, edging out a Stanford team that had won the prior 5 titles. Michigan's Fred Richard won the all-around national title individually as well. And no coincidence, he joins us now for our big interview. Fred, what did it mean, not just for your team to win a national championship, but to win it in Ann Arbor in front of your home fans?
Yeah, I mean, that was big. I don't know if we would have been able to do it without them. Not only just the energy in the stadium when we're competing, but when you know it's going to be hosted in Ann Arbor, for the year before, we're locked in. We refuse to not take home that championship with all our fans watching. So it really pushed us in the gym every single day, and it made it happen.
Well, you did make it happen. I mentioned it was the 7th team title all time for Michigan, the first one since 2014 when they also won at Chrysler. How much of that history were you guys aware of, like particularly as it goes down the stretch here and you think, hey, we're on the precipice of getting this done? Like, do you think about any of that, the significance of what it would mean?
Yeah, we thought about it beforehand. It's been over 10 years since the last championship. And funny enough, during the last championship, there was an Olympian, Sam McCulloch, who is one of the top in our sport in this country. And so as me and Paul are Olympians looking at, like, what is our legacy, we thought, wow, we still need to bring home a championship for our team. And that really made us, want this really badly and want to lead the team to victory. So, yeah. You
mentioned Paul. Paul is, of course, Paul Judah, your Olympic teammate and your teammate here with Michigan. And it came down to the vault. That was the final event, the final rotation for you guys, and you absolutely nailed yours. And then Paul went, and he needed to hit a certain score for you guys to edge out Stanford and to win the title. How much were you aware, maybe before your vault? Like, did you have a sense of how much was riding on it? And then did you know when Paul was going what he needed to get as well?
Yeah, so this is the rule we have on our team. Never look at the score. And I'm thankful that we never looked, because I didn't know how close it was. I thought, we're great gymnasts. We just do our job. We're going to win. I didn't realize that we would win by 1/10 of a point. It can't get any smaller than that in our sport. If I didn't stick, we lost. If Paul took any more deduction on his, we lost. And having that pressure before you go would definitely probably change the way you do it. But I knew we had what it takes to do it. And I was just focused on enjoying the moment, taking in the energy from the crowd. I feel like the universe just did it for me, just like lifted me up in the air, twisted me, put me down perfectly.
Oh, it's beautiful. Individually, again, the excitement is around the team national championship, no doubt, but you have to take some incredible sense of accomplishment in winning the individual title, and it's the 2nd time that you have done it in 3 years. So you are in that wonderful, luxurious position of being able to compare your own national championships. How did the second one compare to the first one?
Oh, this one was I would say a lot better, only because I was gunning for that team so badly, and then you get two bonuses at the end of it. But it's hard. This sport is hard to stay in the top shape, peak at the right time every single year. Every time you win, someone else is coming for your spot. And I wanted it really badly. I wanted to not slack after the Olympics. After getting back from the Olympics, it's easy to say, let's take this year easy and then plan for the next years. But I got right back into it, kept my head down in the gym, and it showed now, which I'm really grateful for.
Well, we were talking before we went on the air, just down the line a little bit, and you were telling me you got 8 new championship trophies or medals coming out of this weekend, so even more hardware. Is there a particular, is it like, if you were to rank them, like does the Olympic medal, does it supersede all of them? Where do these individual national championships fit in? How would you rank all of the hardware you've gotten in your time as a gymnast?
And it's a good question. I think there's 2 that are very easy to outdo the rest, and that would definitely be the Olympic team medal and this NCAA team medal. Then I guess the all-around NCAA championships. But these 2 next to each other, I don't know which one I love more. It's like both of them I was representing something much bigger than myself, giving everything to it, training with guys by my side. And so those 2 are definitely on the top, and then the other ones fall under. But the list is getting longer and longer. I'm going to have to start like getting better memory to keep track of all of them.
Do you remember the first one you won? You remember the first piece of gymnastics hardware you took home?
I would say I don't remember the first, but I remember my first competitions, and I remember not remembering the next, like the routine I'm supposed to do, the skills, and my coach in the corner. I'm like 5 or 6,
right?
Like whispering the next moves. So yeah.
What is it about gymnastics that captures you? I mean, I've read stories about you where you literally get your meals DoorDash to the gym because you don't want to leave. You take naps in the foam pit because, again, you don't want to leave. You just want to be in the gym. What is it that grabbed you at such a young age and has turned you into the champion that you are?
I think it's probably the number one, the challenge of you never can reach the top. Like there's endless potential to get better. You can always add another twist, always do another flip, always get stronger and invent this new move. And so it's like the obsession of seeing how far I can really go, and there is no cap.
Do you give yourself a little bit of grace now? It was interesting to hear you talk about coming out of the Olympics. You won a bronze medal there, which is just an unbelievable accomplishment. And then you come home, and instead of saying, hey, I'm just going to slack off a little bit, which seems to be totally out of your nature, you refocus, you get this team national championship, the individual national championship. Can you give yourself a little grace and cut yourself a little slack now, or what's next?
No grace, no slack. I was in the gym today. I was in the gym yesterday. We got some big things coming up. Next week, next Friday, I break the backflip world record, the most backflips in 24 hours world record, which I'll have to do over 1,000 backflips in 24 hours. And I'm doing this to raise money to bring like high-level equipment to kids in Africa who don't have those resources. That's the next challenge. It's a marathon. I'm kind of scared. I'm trying to figure out how do I get to this level? How do I don't do backflips all day long, but I just love never stopping and trying to do big things.
Okay, so I had seen you mention this when you were on a couple weeks ago after winning the Big Ten title, and so I had to break down the math a little bit. So it's right around 1 backflip per minute, right, for 24 hours? Is that right?
Yeah, if you do 1 backflip a minute, you'll break the record in 18 hours. So I'm planning to go for 18 hours plus, and it'll be a big event. Different guests will come in, keep people entertained, and I'll just be going 18 hours straight. And
you're going to do this on campus in Ann Arbor?
No, I'm going to do it in the very first gym that I started in, actually. So in Boston.
Okay, so in Boston. Awesome. Well, that's really great. It's a noble pursuit. I know gymnastics has changed your life significantly, to say the least, and to do what you're doing and help provide that opportunity for other young people is really something. So we will be watching. I know you have a huge social media presence, so people can follow it on social media, I would assume. Is that a safe bet?
Yeah, they'll definitely see it on social media, basically any platform. Frederick Flips is the handle, but we'll make sure it hits them somehow. That's the goal. That they don't even have to look for it; it will hit them.
All right, Fred. Well, hey, congratulations on all your accomplishments. You're really gracious in victory, and we appreciate you spending some time with us again here on Big Ten Today.
No problem. Thank you, guys.
All right, so that is Fred Richard. We'll go back to football with Anthony next. Some key spring storylines. The Bucks looking to repeat. Michigan trying to bounce back. Indiana looking for an encore. Is this Penn State's here? All of that is just ahead. New lacrosse polls, 3 women's teams in the top 10, led by 3rd-ranked Northwestern, the Big Ten regular season champ. Don't forget, the women's conference tourney starts tomorrow. The quarterfinals are on Big Ten Plus. the semis and the finals on the Big Ten Network Friday and Sunday this weekend. On the men's side, the Big Ten with 3 of the top 7 teams in the country, led by second-ranked Maryland. Ohio State won the regular season title. They're the top seed in the men's tourney. That starts Saturday on Big Ten Plus, and then the semis and the title game are the following weekend here on the Big Ten Network. Ant is back with us. We are going to go through some big spring storylines, and we were trying to figure out how to arrange this, and we decided to go by time zones. So we're going to go east to west.
We've got a few of those.
Yeah, we have. We're going to go east to west. We're going to follow the sun, much like some ancient cultures. And
right.
we will start with Ohio State, not the furthest east, but the reigning national champs. So we'll start with them. Biggest storylines for Ohio State as they look to repeat. What stands out to you?
Well, obviously the most pressure-laden meeting room in the country for years had become that Ohio State quarterback meeting room. And now coming off of a national championship, it does feel like there's an exhale that's there for the Ohio State fan base. And, you know, Julian Sayin, Lincoln King-Holtz, they're both guys who are hoping to be able to ascend to become the starting quarterback for Coach Ryan Day. And, of course, huge shoes to fill because of what that position has become in Columbus and how productive it's been. And now we've seen a different example of it where Will Howard transfers in from elsewhere and ascends to new heights and becomes even more productive than he was in his K-State career. But then there is a turnover in the coaching staff, and now Brian Hartline will get his opportunity not to just be a coach in title with the OC label, but he'll actually call the plays in Columbus. We would imagine with some assistance from Ryan Day. But there's a lot of newness with all that talent that gets lost to the National Football League, but a lot of the eyes will be trained on quarterback.
Well, it helps to have Jeremiah Smith, too.
Yeah.
That makes it a little bit easier.
Right.
And Caleb Downs on the other side. They've got some talent, no doubt. Let's talk a little bit about Penn State and kind of next up in this group of teams. There's a lot of talk that they could be this year's Ohio State, right? Like you look at the guys that chose to come back that could have left.
Right. No pressure.
No pressure. you look at like the top teams in the country coming out of last year and who's got a quarterback back and who doesn't. Not many of them do. Penn State does, and a really good one in Drew Aller. It feels like they've been building to this. They even hired Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator from Ohio State. They paid him a pretty penny, over $3 million to be a defensive coordinator. So what do you make of this? Can Penn State do it? Can they be a national champ?
I believe they can. You know, I felt like last season's squad was in prime position to be able to make a college football playoff run in that first expanded playoff. They did so, and we're really on the cusp of a national championship game appearance last year. So the majority of that cast of characters returns to State College, and it feels like they recognize what this opportunity is in a very similar fashion to what so many of those Buckeyes that could have gone on last season to the National Football League returned for one more year to pursue a national title. In Penn State, you know, they've got at first the Big Ten championship to try and pursue. They made the championship game last year. Drew Aller was right there on the cusp of leading them back against Oregon. They didn't quite get that done with the Big Ten title, but then that's the great thing about the expanded playoff. So there's multiple goals that Penn State will have the opportunity to pursue. And to your point, so much talent returns to State College. And then even, you know, losing key players in key spots. Like, yes, you don't have Abdul Carter anymore, but we know how great Denai Dennis-Sutton, Zane Durant, they've got other guys on that defensive front. Even Luke Reynolds as a tight end. He feels like a budding standout player after you lose a guy like Tyler Warren. But to have the proven commodities in place, especially in the backfield, quarterback, multiple running backs in Singleton and Allen. There's a lot of guys who will have big expectations, high hopes, but it feels like that could be a part of what bolsters the potential for the full group, because if you falter at any point in any individual position room, you have other studs who are there to potentially pick up the slack. So this is one of the best teams in America. They were already that last season, and there are so many key spots that return intact. And you finally do have a little bit of continuity, at least at offensive coordinator. Year 2 for Andy Kotelnicki, and he'll get to work with Drew Aller yet again.
It worked out extremely well, I would say, in year 1. And I do think also just getting that CFP monkey off their back. Right, like kind of coming into the year, that was the question around Penn State. Can they make it to the CFP? They did that. And so now, can you take that next step and be a national championship program? There was no one asking last year whether Indiana could be a CFB team, except for maybe a few guys around the Indiana program. I think it was the best story in college football last year, just how unexpected it was under Curt Cignetti, who, of course, is oozing self-confidence. And so now the question becomes, what do you do for an encore? Can Indiana be a program that is consistently competing for the CFP? And those questions start to be answered this year.
And to be able to go out into the portal yet again this offseason, it's another portal-heavy squad that Curt Cignetti has this year, but it'll be a different vibe than the portal-heavy squad from last year because these aren't all pre-existing relationships that Curt Cignetti had. The majority of them aren't players who played for him before. And so now there'll be sort of a brand new aspect to what Hoosier football looks like under Curt Cignetti because these won't be a bunch of players who already recognize how he operates. You do have the combination with some of the pre-existing Indiana talent that can begin to try and deliver that message. But, when you have, at the quarterback position, Fernando Mendoza,
right.
He's getting to know Curt Cignetti, but he does have his younger brother who's there, who can help him learn the ropes of Curt Cignetti. But it's going to be a different feel to this year's Hoosier squad.
I do think that part of it is interesting, and this isn't in any way. I mean, it was, like I said, I think it was the best story in college football. It was one of the greatest one-season turnarounds I have ever seen in my life. But the portal really helped in that he was able to say, hey, these are the best guys from JMU.
The best guys from me,
over.
right?
Yeah, exactly. These are the guys that will work. So, and again, you're talking about taking players from the group of five and translating them not just to the Big Ten, but to the top of the Big Ten.
Right.
Again, I'm not in any way minimizing what they did. I'm just saying it does become more difficult as the year goes on, as the years go on, I should say, and you're in the same boat that everyone else is in, where guys get into the portal and then you have 3 or 4 days to figure out whether this is the right person for us rather than having, at a minimum, an entire year and in some cases several years to evaluate players.
All that newness that was there last year performed as continuity because his coaching staff came with him, his players came with him. Yes, the quarterback was different, but Curtis Rourke was so experienced at the college football level, so even he made that transition look smooth. Now, to Curt Cignetti, to Mike Shanahan's credit, every quarterback virtually that plays for them is of all conference or conference player of the year caliber, and that was certainly the conversation that Curtis Rourke was in with his performance last season. So to have Mendoza step in at quarterback, he's got major college already experience that's there, a little bit of a multi-dimensional talent, but I think for Curt Cignetti, we know what he can do at QB. We know what that running back position became, and he adds Roman Hemby. Able to swipe him away from Maryland, and you got to, replace a couple of Ninja Turtles there in the backfield. But Hemby, we know what a playmaker he can be.
And they'll have some time to ease into it, too, if the transition is maybe a little more difficult than last year, because I don't know that I've ever seen a non-conference schedule quite like Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State. I like their chances early on next year.
Strong start.
What about Michigan? And we had Jake Budd on yesterday, and he had been at the spring game, and so got a chance to see it up close. There was some talk about Bryce Underwood's numbers. I think he had a little perspective of saying, hey, the team was divided in half. He didn't have his new offensive coordinator calling the plays there. But there is a lot of pressure that's going to be on Underwood. I know they got Mikey Keene. He was banged up in the spring. How much of it do you think, though, falls on Underwood's shoulders?
Well, for folks who, of course, didn't get the opportunity yet to watch it, they'll get to see it,
on this
weekend. Of course, this weekend on the network. And look forward to that because you will be impressed. If you're hopeful about Bryce Underwood and you heard the numbers, saw some stats from folks out there and got a little bit concerned, there's a level of composure that Bryce Underwood showed out there that really goes beyond anything you may have seen reported statistically. And that's what you hope for a young, talented quarterback as much as anything. Does he look like he knows what he's doing? Does he seem comfortable in his own skin and on the field? And he certainly looked the part in that regard. And he and all his Michigan teammates are learning Chip Lindsey's offense for the first time. I've gotten to evaluate, be around, call some games of Chip Lindsey back when he was at Arizona State. And he's able to accentuate the strengths of multidimensional quarterbacks. Like Manny Wilkins was his quarterback back at Arizona State, a guy who was not only very proficient from within the pocket, but moved well. We saw a little bit of that at the Big House from Bryce Underwood the other day. He's certainly capable of doing both. And we were just talking to Indiana. They had Donovan McCauley, a very statuesque playmaking wide receiver into the mix. So maybe you got some additional playmakers on the outside that can be bolstered as well. There's no doubt that Michigan's offensive line will continue to be what leads the way for them.
McCulley was great on that Indiana team 2 years ago. He was far and away their best receiver. And then it kind of felt like when we were there in the preseason last year, maybe he had been passed up a little bit and maybe wasn't a great fit with the new staff, but size-wise, he's really fabulous. Again, you can see that Michigan spring game on Sunday here on the Big Ten Network. I do want to ask you a little bit about Michigan State. Had Jonathan Smith on last week, and we were talking a little bit about year 2 and the transition for him. They fell 1 game short of a bowl last year. He had some continuity at quarterback as well with Aiden Childs, and now he brings his quarterback coach over from Oregon State as well. What do you see as the keys as Michigan State looks to move forward and get back to being a bowl team?
Well, Aiden Childs became a full-time starter at the major college level last season and did so in the deepest conference in college football. And so there were some of those ups and downs that you expect from a young and gifted quarterback. But the highs were really high for Aiden Childs. The playmaking ability was on display. You look for them to continue to work to refine his game, and having another season with Nick Marsh as a wide receiver, Brian Lindgren calling the plays, but then they also add Amari Kelly into the mix as a wide receiver. An MTSU transfer, came in out of Murfreesboro, and he's got experience at the power conference level at Auburn prior to that. And so hopefully he can be a bit of a foil for Nick Marsh as well, where now you got multiple receivers who are accustomed to making big plays. And one of the focuses of Jonathan Smith this spring was to get more physical on the line of scrimmage, add some numbers and some beef there, and it really seems they've done that.
This was the big point. When I talked to him last week and kind of said, hey, what did you need to improve on in the spring? He said, first answer, unequivocally, we have to get better in the trenches, both sides of the ball. And that was a big focus for them, both in terms of what they worked on in the spring and in terms of some of the roster changes that they made as well. All right, good stuff there from Ant. We are gradually moving our way west. We're going to get to the central time zone next. The teams and stories to watch as we exit spring practice. We'll focus on a few of the bigger ones straight ahead. We are back on Big Ten today. We're continuing to work our way west through the Big Ten time zones. We've arrived in the central time zone, which if I were to power rank the Big Ten time zones, I'd go.
Pretty good.
That's a great time zone.
Yeah.
Absolutely great time zone. I'm a little biased, though. Okay, Illinois. 10 wins last year. They finished the year ranked 16th in the country. This, to me, feels like I almost don't know if they're a sleeper at this point, because I do think a lot of people are talking about them as a potential CFP team. But, man, they did a great job of retaining players. It's clearly going to be Brett Bielema's best team, I think. What would it take for them to be a team that does what Indiana did a year ago and is maybe a non-traditional power that breaks through?
Well, the word you used, retention, that was really the big part of it. Yeah, I mean, when you think about how the transfer portal has really adjusted things in this sport as it continues to evolve every year, the quarterback portion of the portal that continues to churn here as we speak. But Luke Altmaier returns on offense. Gabe Akis returns on defense. 18 out of 22 starters back from a 10-win squad last year. And the Illini have never in their program's history had back-to-back 10-win seasons, and there is every potential for them to achieve that this coming year. In the spring season, I think there were upwards of 20 players who are recovering from surgery right now. So that's a part of the storyline. It's the reason that Brett Bielema notes that they didn't do a spring game. We're accustomed to seeing the Illini take the spring game field and make sure that everyone can see what their program's up to. But a lot of players were banged up, but they were able to retain the majority of their standouts, and having that type of talent return, yes, I think the Illini are primed for what could be a historic year.
I think so, too. Took a huge jump on the defensive side of the ball last year, second year, I should say, for Aaron Henry as defensive coordinator. First year didn't go all that well. Second year was much better. Right. This could be a very exciting season in Champaign. I think the schedule cooperates to a certain extent for them, so they've got a great chance. Let's talk about Nebraska. First winning season last year in nearly a decade. They finally got that monkey off their back of going to a bowl game. It started off well. There was a little bit of a stretch where you said, oh, no, this isn't going to happen again, is it? And then they figured it out there at the end. You have Dylan Raiola, who made, I thought, some really nice progress. They figured out offensive coordinator late in the season. You bring in Dana Holgorsen. Now you have the whole offseason to work with him. Can Nebraska make a jump? I don't want to start down this CFP. Like, I just feel like we throw so much on Nebraska every
Trust
single
me, there's
year.
Nebraska fans going there for you.
No, I know there are. And I always feel like it's unfair to the program. However, like, can they be a team that competes now maybe to win 9 games and really be a factor in the Big Ten race?
To achieve that next threshold, like the next reasonable threshold of building, developing a program. And I certainly believe so, you know, using the term roster retention again. Dylan Raiola certainly would have been a coveted quarterback for a variety of teams out there. He stays intact with his dad's alma mater. And you can't go around campus in Lincoln without seeing Dylan Raiola out there supporting one of the other teams there for the Huskers. And so he's become kind of the billboard, as it were, for Nebraska, not only football, but their athletic department as a whole. And so they're going to do the Husker games this weekend. It's something to look forward to. There's going to be a wing eating contest.
Ooh.
There's going to be media members out there.
In the wing eating.
Well, I would nominate you for that as well. I don't know.
I'm not a great wing eater.
What's your last eating contest you participated in?
You know, I won the watermelon eating contest in my block party at age 5. I still have the trophy. Yeah,
all right. Well, we got to get you back with Frederick Flips.
Compare
trophies.
I think this room's a little bit bigger than mine, but you know that watermelon.
Nebraska now has the opportunity. They will continue to compile trophies here, I think, moving forward with this squad they bring back intact. You mentioned Dana Holgorsen having the opportunity to spend an offseason with Raiola. I think that's going to pay dividends.
Let's talk about Iowa. It feels like they finally have found a quarterback. Mark Gronowski comes over from South Dakota State. You're excited. Your eyes are
pensive,
are lighting up. Well, now he did have off-season shoulder surgery, which worries me a little bit. I'm not going to lie here. It's interesting. Like, the defense last year wasn't quite at the level we've come to expect, which maybe is a little unfair because obviously we expect it to be among the very top of the country, and maybe it was just a notch below. But Gronowski giving Iowa fans a lot of hope.
I can't think of any quarterback who's hit a new program in the portal that's got the resume that Mark Gronowski does. I mean, multi-time All-American, multi-time Conference Player of the Year, national champion at the FCS level, yes, but South Dakota State, I mean, we've seen them compete against power conference competition on a consistent basis. So he goes to Iowa City. I can't imagine a signal caller who Iowa fans could have been more hopeful to be able to add to the program than someone like this. So he comes in, and it does feel like there's no way he's not going to be at least as good as they've had at quarterback, but to upgrade that spot with what this program has been, what they return on both lines of scrimmage and in the backfield, this could be an Iowa squad. I mean, I don't mind talking playoff for the Hawkeyes perspective.
Look at you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're heaping the pressure on. Real quick on Wisconsin. Last year we saw the 22-year bowl streak come to an end. It feels like maybe, and reading between the lines a little bit because I really want to see them practice before I say this, but it feels like they're leaning back a little bit more on what they have been historically, certainly in terms of an offensive approach, and I'm wondering whether that ends up serving them well here going forward.
We expect with Jeff Grimes coming in to run the offense, the stretch zone scheme will be a big part of how they operate in running the football. Some depth in the backfield. You know, you want to see, does any one proven full-time back emerge, or is it a running back by committee approach? What could work really well. And Billy Edwards comes in at quarterback. We've seen this approach really throughout Luke Fickell's entire time there. Someone with experience with a different program brings his pedigree to Madison.
And we were talking about this yesterday, Jake and I were like, it might have been different if Tyler Van Dyke hadn't gotten hurt last year, right? That was a huge part of it, just the inability to move the ball productively through the air. But again, Jeff Grimes, a lot of excitement about him. The dramatic conclusion of our show next. We'll wrap things up with a look at the biggest storylines for some of the conference's newest programs as we head west. Stick around. Wrapping things up on Big Ten today. As you may have heard in the last couple of days, Nico Iamaleava transferring to UCLA. That story's been out there a little bit.
Yeah, prominent.
I don't know if you caught on to it. The former Tennessee quarterback, native of Long Beach, California, left the volunteer program last week. He helped guide them to the CFP last season. Joins a Bruins program that was 15th in the Big Ten in scoring offense in conference play last year. So we start our West Coast tour there. And how does this change the outlook in your mind for UCLA?
Well, it certainly upgrades the quarterback room and the depth of the quarterback room, because not only Nico Iamaleava, but now his younger brother, Madden Iamaleava, joins him in there as well. And so you have at least two quarterbacks of pedigree. Madden hadn't gotten to play major college football yet, but he just transfers in from Arkansas. And so now you've reshaped that one individual room in a program that showed so much development last season. You think about them winning 4 out of their final 6 games after just some near misses in a few weeks prior to that. So there's a lot of excitement that's now some momentum you would think Deshaun Foster can continue to build off of in an offseason that's his really first true opportunity to try and put this program in his image. I'm astounded at the aggression he's shown and being able to pull it off.
New offensive coordinator Tino Sunseri was part of the success they had at Indiana. So really excited to see UCLA. Huge shot in the arm for them. Crosstown quarterback's a story as well. Iamaleava, we saw him take over as the season ended last year for USC. Can he be Lincoln Riley's next great quarterback?
It really feels like with the way he finished up last season that potential is there. We know how Lincoln Riley's developed so many quarterbacks over the years, and at least now you're in a position where we've seen some of that development from Iamaleava show itself in actual production. He's been in big games and big moments, rivalry situations, and Lincoln Riley seems to be taking a fairly workmanlike approach to this, wanting to make sure they develop the defense, bolster the coaching staff, and surround Iamaleava with help on each line of scrimmage to make sure that the entire game won't be on his shoulders.
They got a lot better on defense last year. I mean, it was weird to see the offensive downturn that they had, but that was really promising because obviously that's been a thorn in the side for Lincoln Riley through the years. I do want to spend, we don't have a ton of time left, and obviously we'll talk all about these teams a ton before the season starts, but quick thoughts on Oregon, #1, the only undefeated team in the country in the regular season. We all know what happened in the CFP, but it feels like they are reloading.
And to have a quarterback who got to sit and learn for a little while, it's not always the popular thing to do, but we do anticipate that Dante Moore is in line to become the Ducks' starting QB. And he was able to sit behind a Heisman candidate at QB, and now his skill set should be accentuated by what they do in Eugene. And there's so much talent that returns. Yeah, they lose some guys on both sides of the ball to the National Football League, but a lot of the talent returns to Eugene as well.
I like Will Stein's track record with quarterbacks. It's done
well.
It's gone pretty well here in the last couple of years with Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel. Thanks so much for watching Big Ten Today. We'll see you next time.